What PC parts should you think about buying in this current environment? Today we're going to take a look at both used and new products, so let's get it on.
Are you sick and tired of gaming on gaming chairs and want something that's going to be extremely comfortable? Well, if that's you, then today's video sponsor ErgoTune has the perfect chair for you. Coming in at half the price point as some of the top-end brands like Herman Miller, but still offering just the same amount of comfort, the Supreme and Classic lines are sure to impress. Me personally, I've found my favorite chair. Links in the description below to find out more.
So getting back from my local computer store, I've just picked up some cases and power supplies. And these two components are some of the most crucial components that are susceptible, I feel, to price hikes in the next few months. And the reason being is because power supplies and cases, generally the entry-level stuff, if we're talking 500 watt or 600 watt power supplies, and also baseline cases, these generally have really low margins. And so when something has really low margins, it's also susceptible to price increases if the cost of manufacturing goes up. And generally when it comes to cases and power supplies, I feel like these will go up roughly 20 to 30%. And so if you're in the market to build a PC, these are the first two components I recommend buying straight away because the prices are still pretty decent. But also, what about some other parts in the industry? We'll talk about margins and what you can expect in the next few months, and also what my recommendations would be for holding off on certain things and buying certain things. And also, if you're wondering who my little mascot is here, he is P-Man.
So going through some of these power supplies, I'm pulling up some budget options here that personally I would be in the market for. First up here is a 460 watt from EVGA. It's got a 3-year warranty and the 12 volt rail carries some decent ampage. There's also some other examples like a 450 watt for $25, a 450 watt Tough Gaming, and also a 500 watt for $37. And then there's lastly a 400 watt. All of these power supplies will do something, for instance, like a RX 570 build, absolutely fine, coupled in with some of the CPUs that we'll show up in the next few slides. And just like power supplies, here's some examples of some of the cases I'd be in the market for if I was in the US. I feel like these cases, once they're sold out at these prices, the prices will revert to that of higher prices. Though the next component that we're going to talk about is motherboards. And both on the Ryzen and the Intel side, they have still decent prices. I just haven't focused on motherboards as much because I know companies like ASRock, Asus, Gigabyte, and also MSI, earlier in the year, they were bundling motherboards heavily with graphics cards. And because they had so many components on hand, they were pushing out all these motherboards, and there's an abundance of motherboards, at least locally here. Now, of course, motherboards aren't cheap to manufacture. And in fact, the margins on entry-level motherboards, just like entry-level power supplies and cases, I feel like they are very tight. And basically what I'm referring to when I talk about margins is that's the cost to produce it for the manufacturer versus what they sell the product for. And so the correct term here is actually gross margins. But what we're going to see is once the inflation truly kicks in and all the costs of these components go up, then the costs naturally have to rise for things like these entry-level boards. So what we've got here is some B450s. I feel like at $67, for example, this is still a very solid deal, as well as a B450 Aorus. And then I've pulled up an ASRock B450 Pro 4 and also an H410 motherboard and a B460 motherboard. However, the Intel boards are a little bit more expensive, and I feel they're a little bit more expensive because a lot of people are buying up the budget 10th gen i3s and i5s. And we'll move over to that right now, where we can see here, there's a 10100F for $97. Some of you guys pointed out in yesterday's video, and if you haven't seen that, I'll put the link up here. And what yesterday's video refers to about what we're talking about today is essentially inflation. So it is important for context on what I'm talking about and recommending in today's video. But there's also the 10105F, which does have an extra 100 megahertz of speed. Maybe an option if you're just looking for that little bit more FPS, especially at 1080p or even 720p gaming. Though if you're also looking for a 6-core 12-thread, there's the 10400F. Though if you are looking to get a budget Ryzen CPU, then in the US, I think the prices have gone up quite a bit. So you can still purchase these on AliExpress for a really good price. And in fact, since the motherboards are cheaper on Amazon for the B450s than they are for the H410s or the B460s, I'd actually be going with this route personally, where the 2600, great value at $118, and there's also the Ryzen 5 3600 at $190. There's also the Ryzen 5 3500X. However, I liked this CPU a lot more when it was closer to that $100 price point. So I'd prefer to buy the Ryzen 5 2600 or the 3600 when the 3500X is at this given price point. Now the next component is Ddr4 memory. This stuff is still going very cheap, where you can pick it up for $50 for a 16GB kit. That's 2x8. This is perfectly fine for gaming. The 3000 MHz CL16 is also fine for getting good FPS, especially for the money. Now, when it comes to RAM, the cheapest I've seen this stuff on sale is in the low 40s. And so given that 20 to 30% inflation buffer that I feel like it's going to kick in, this is where you can expect some of the lowest price points on Ddr4 memory. So if we look here, we've got $50. I would snap that up if I was in the market for some Ddr4 memory. Though the final components to lock in the build would be SSDs, where we've got here 240 gigabytes going for $27. Yeah, you recommend that too, don't you? And then there's also a 1 terabyte for $83. And of course, at these prices, I just don't think you will see them go any lower going forward. The last components to talk about is the graphics cards, but I'm not really recommending them at their current price points. As you can see here, they're just ridiculously overpriced. And this is coming in much higher than those MSRPs. But one thing to note about those MSRPs is that they're already coming in at higher price points than what the market would generally expect. And so the profit margins for Nvidia and AMD at this current point in time are just ridiculously high. And so what this means is that AMD and Nvidia are going to keep pumping these graphics cards out as fast as they can, because those margins are good and they want to make as much profit as they can. And so I do feel like the price of GPUs are directly correlated to mining profits right now. The higher the mining profit goes, the higher GPU prices go. But if the mining profitability does sink in the next few months, then you can definitely expect graphics card prices to come down. And if you've got the whole rest of the system built up, then you will be in a good position to still build a PC in these turbulent times at a really good price. So now in closing out, you may be wondering, what about the higher end stuff? Say for instance, the 5900X, the 5950X, etc. Then these high end CPUs, basically the margins on these products are really high for both AMD and Intel. So if there's demand for them, even MSRP, then AMD and Intel will ramp up production to meet that demand. And so we saw this earlier in the year with the 5900X and also the 5950X, where they were going grossly over their MSRP, but now they seem to have come back down in price. And I personally wouldn't expect those prices to change all that much in the next few months. So that's the products I would personally be looking for at this point in time if I was worried about prices going up. This is on the new side of things. When it comes to used parts, I'm always looking for a good deal. And in fact, I do recommend the 4th gen Haswell Xeons. I feel like they represent phenomenal value for money. Even buying these off AliExpress with the accompanying machinist motherboards, they represent really good value. Of course, used graphics cards, I've made videos about that in the past. I constantly buy used graphics cards. I personally think some of the 10th and 9th gen Nvidia cards, as well as some of the AMD R9 380 and 370s, are some of the better cards to get right now, at least if you don't want to get ripped off. Though I will put some links in the description below for you guys. Also, if you've got recommendations of your own, then feel free to chime in on the comments, as we're all about helping everyone out getting a good deal here at Tech Yes City. But with that aside, I will talk about and continuing on with yesterday's video about what I'm doing personally outside of tech and with assets and things like that, because some people were asking me in the comments what I'd be buying personally. And this comes down to my portfolio of, I'm investing in real estate, I like precious metals right now, and I'm also holding some cash just in case black swan events do occur. And as we've seen in the last 20 years, these events seem to be occurring more often and they seem to hit harder when they do occur. But the last thing I'll talk about is, because some people talk about it in the comment section, is cryptocurrencies. Now, I'm not against miners, or I don't hate miners and I don't hate cryptocurrency. I just think cryptocurrency is in a massive bubble right now where it's more speculation than actual utility. And when something attracts so much speculation, then it's bound to drop in price sooner or later. But that being said, the track record for crypto, especially in the last year, has been absolutely phenomenal. If you invested in crypto, then you might want to think about cashing in some of your profits, at least to cover your original bets or the cost of your equipment. And then in Australia, after you've done that, we call that betting with the house's money. Though as for crypto and more specifically mining, and me personally, I delved in this in 2017, 2018 quite heavily, and it just really, I could see how harmful it was for the PC gaming industry back then. But it fast forward to 2020 and 2021, but we can see the effects are even worse than they were back a few years ago, where it's now really affecting the PC gaming industry, especially the prices of graphics cards. And so for me personally, the reason I don't mine crypto and I don't delve in crypto nowadays is because I owe everything and I'm very loyal to PC gaming. It's built up my life in different ways that it'd take me a long time to explain in a video, but people that know me personally know that YouTube and PC gaming related to YouTube has really changed my life for the better, and that I got to make all these videos and have fun, especially with used products, that really it changed my life, because I was going through a really hard time about 5 years ago in my life, and the one avenue I could really focus on was just PC gaming, and especially that used price performance stuff, and then upload it to YouTube. And from there, I owe everything to that. Though in terms of crypto, although I don't do it, I understand why people are doing it. They need to make money, especially if they're doing it tough and mining is helping them get through these difficult times. But when it comes to a speculative asset like crypto, it's pretty much taking the wealth away from another industry, and that industry is PC gaming. But the last thing I'll address is also some of the guys in the comments that say that I'm salty about crypto, and I'm not salty at all. I actually admire some of you guys that have done really well out of crypto. I just hope that you don't come undone, because I have seen in the past people come undone very heavily with speculative assets, and it's ruined their lives. So I always caution people to take a step back and say, what can you afford to lose versus what you cannot afford to lose? But going forward, what is going to happen with inflation and also possibly deflation that some people are talking about? I would say the only people who would know for certain these answers would be the central bankers and high-level ranking government officials, because they are the ones putting in the policies that's affecting everyone's lives right now. So if there was one thing that I would like to find out, it would be some of the personal finances of some of these people in power, and whether they're heavily leveraged or whether they are deleveraging. Because where we're at right now is a very critical point in history where you can see that the debt in the world is so high that if you don't keep increasing the money supply via things like quantitative easing or stimulus bills, then what's going to happen is that debt is going to be a massive deflationary factor. So in order to get the inflation that these central banks and governors want, they have to keep printing more and more money. So what you're looking for in the M2 money supply is that line essentially exponentially increasing. And we are starting to see that trend if we look at the M2 money supply graph, which does concern me a lot. So basically in this point in time, if you see the money print is either slowing down or what they call tapering off, then you will see lower levels of inflation, and you will also see potentially a crash due to the amount of debt in the system. And so for me personally, in terms of inflation and relating to all the goods that you purchase, I'm watching what the governments and more importantly, the central bankers are doing with their rhetoric, and if they're buying bonds. If they continue to buy bonds at even a more aggressive pace, then you will see possibly even more inflation continue. But if they do taper off, then you will see inevitably a crash. But with that aside, we've got the question of the day here, which comes from Alan Brown, and they ask thoughts on FX CPUs. And the FX CPUs are the old Bulldozer and FX 6300 and 8120, I think there was, an 8150. Those CPUs for me personally, they're not really on my radar, but if I do come into them on used parts hunts for very cheap, then I always pick them up because they can still play things like Valorant and things like CSGO absolutely fine, and there's always a market for that. So if the price is cheap enough, then I would go for that personally, but it's not on my to get list. I think the older i7s, especially the Xeons, offer much better value than the FX CPUs if they are at the same price point. Anyway, guys, that's it from me today. If you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to hit that like button. Also, let us know what you think of the new co-host here, P-Man. And if you stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Guest content, be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out for now. Later.